أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء وسيد المرسلين وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المكرمين الغرر الميامين، سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلائق أجمعين، سيدنا وإمام زماننا وصاحب نعمتنا وولي أمرنا، مهدي هذه الأمة وطاووس أهل الجنة، الحجة بن الحسن العسكري، فداه أرواح العالمين. اللهم كل وليك الحجة بن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة، وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا، حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا. اللهم وهب لنا رأفته ورحمته وعونه ودعاءه وخيره ورضاه، ما ننال به سعة من رحمتك وفوزا عندك يا كريم برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. My dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. The discussion was about how to strengthen our spiritual immune system at a time when more and more people are drifting away from the path of righteousness, the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and the religion of the Holy Messenger and his infallible household, at a time when doubts are creeping into our youth's minds and people are becoming disenchanted, so to speak, with religion. Misconceptions are wreaking havoc. I know of people who have left Islam from a single YouTube video, or by having the wrong set of friends, or by even reading a novel which at least on the outside looks benign and innocent. It's just a story. But of course, we know that subliminal messaging is at the bedrock of today's media landscape, and that the devil doesn't present himself as the devil. Since time immemorial, demonic forces have utilized every trick in the book to conceal their true identity and to present themselves as friends rather than foes. Even today, when you look around, you see institutions, political and otherwise, that present themselves as allies, as people who care for you. They might even align some of their politics with your own. They'll say things like, we'll ease immigration policies to allow for the Muslim community, for instance, to bring in more family members. They will announce a set of policies at election time that seem to be in line with our values, but in fact, what you will find soon after they're elected into office, that they are trying to snatch the very souls of your children. And so even though some of their policies, domestic, foreign, seem to be benign and healthy and, as I said, congruent with our interests and our values and whatnot, but in reality what is happening is that that's just the tip of the iceberg. That's the part that you and I are able to see. But when you examine their true agenda and their major policy areas, you will find that they're trying to subvert our values and to completely upend our morality. And this is happening across the globe. It's not confined to any specific geographic region. It is affecting all of us. And so, in a world like this, what are we supposed to do? And we talked a little bit about this in the previous session. One of the things that has to happen, before I get back to the hadith in question that we were trying to extrapolate lessons from, one of the things that has to happen is that the level of awareness has to be elevated. Al-arifu bi-zamanih, the Imams have told us, لا تهجم عليه اللوابس. When you are aware of the world around you, when you understand the tools, the techniques that are being used to upend our morality and to completely snatch our faith from us, then misconceptions won't take you by surprise. In fact, let me share a few ahadith with you. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, على العاقل أن يكون عارفا بزمانه. A person endowed with the intellect has to have a level of awareness and understanding of the times that he or she happens to be living in, so as to take precautionary measures. Not to be taken by surprise and therefore act in a reactionary manner, but rather prepare in advance. For instance, one hadith says, إِذَا كَانَ الْجَوْرُ أَغْلَبْ مِنَ الْحَقِّ. If oppression was more prevalent and more predominant than justice and fairness and truth, if on the balance of scales you notice that there was more evil than good, what do? لم يحل لأحد أن يظن بأحد خيرا حتى يعرف ذلك منه. You should not give others the benefit of the doubt. Imagine we're all taught that when dealing with other people, we have to afford them the benefit of the doubt. We have to treat them as people who are friendly and individuals who harbor good intentions toward us. But the Imam says this is restricted to a time when there is more good than evil. But if there is more evil than good, do not give people the benefit of the doubt حتى يعرف ذلك عنه. Until you test them, until you find truly and establish that they have good intentions. Don't just give everyone the benefit of the doubt. You know, sometimes you have parents who have children, and these children have friends. And because their children have a close relationship with those friends, the parents are naive enough to afford those friends the benefit of the doubt. Where are you going? I'm going out with my friends. Oh, that's okay, as long as you're going out with your friends. But who are these friends? How am I supposed to trust your friends? And so the children might retort by saying, don't you trust me? Don't you trust me? And my answer is, I trust you. Oh, I trust you, honey. I just don't trust the jungle that's full of wolves and vicious creatures out there. I just can't trust society. I can't trust your friends. I don't know them well enough. And so the Imam says, حَتَّى يَعْرِفَ ذَلِكَ عَنْهُ. Until you've established that this is a person that's worthy of trust, can you then give them the benefit of the doubt? Which means you're always monitoring them. You're always ensuring that this trust you've placed in them is not misplaced. Amir al-Mu'mineen also says, أَعْرَفُ النَّاسِ بِالزَّمَانِ مَنْ لَمْ يَتَعَجَّبْ مِنْ أَحْدَاثِهِ. The one who's most aware of the times and the world around them are the ones who are not taken by surprise. You know, sometimes we sit down and we think, why is this happening? Why is that happening? Someone who's developed a level of awareness about the world around them is never surprised. It's almost like they know what the plan is, and so whatever happens is simply one of the points on that plan, on that roadmap. They understand that the roadmap is leading to a place. They understand the destination. They understand how we're going to get there, and so they're never taken by surprise. الْمُؤْمِنُ يَقْظَانُ مُرْتَقِبٌ. What a beautiful hadith. A believer is someone who's alert, someone who's awake. You know how when you're driving, they say you shouldn't speak on the phone, for instance. You shouldn't be distracted. You shouldn't be tired. Why? Because it literally takes a few seconds of distraction before utter catastrophe. A few seconds speaking on the phone. I mean, I've tested this myself. When I'm on the phone and I'm in the car, even as a passenger, when I close the phone, I suddenly become aware of where I am. And I'm like, how did we get here? Our minds are designed in such a way where we cannot direct our attention to two things at the same time. Multitasking it's not a reality. And so the Imam says that a believer is someone who's always alert, always on the lookout. This isn't being paranoid. This is you being awake, aware, and alert. عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام, I want to share some of these hadith with you, not only because كلامكم نور وأمركم رشد, the words of the Ahlul Bayt are themselves lights that illuminate the path that we're supposed to take, but also because the hadith point to critical and important points that we need to be aware of. عن أبي عبد الله عليه السلام قال قام رجل يقال له همام وكان عابدا ناسكا مجتهدا إلى أمير المؤمنين. An individual who's in constant worship, someone who, you know, in the community sometimes there's that one elder you always look up to as a holy personality, someone who's respected. Hammam was one of them. He got up to Amir al-Mu'mineen and he said to him, the Imam was delivering a sermon. He said to him, يا أمير المؤمنين صف لنا صفة المؤمن كأننا ننظر إليه. Describe a believer to us such that we're looking at them. In other words, I want a detailed, vivid description of a believer. فقال عليه السلام يا همام المؤمن هو الكيس الفطن. Someone who's intelligent, smart, and is perceptive. A perceptive person is someone who catches all the signals, understands the world around them. وَمِنْ عِرْفَانِهِ أَعْلَمُ أَوْ عِلْمُهُ بِزَمَانِهِ. The word irfan is not mentioned commonly in our religious literature. Today the word irfan is a euphemism for Sufism. But generally speaking, the Imams don't talk about irfan. This is one of the rare cases where the word irfan is used. And the Imam describes it in a manner that's contrary to how it's described or how it's understood today. The Imam says, you want irfan? It is to understand and be aware of the times that you're in. Irfan isn't about some spiritual wayfaring. Irfan is about having ma'rifah of the world around you. In other words, I'll give you an example. In the United States, there is a media mogul, a company, that owns dozens and dozens of local TV and radio stations. This company literally dictates what the news anchors and the broadcasters say on all of these stations. In other words, there was a recent case where an announcement had to be made to the viewers of these TV stations. And if you watch the channel, if you happen to be in Seattle or in Miami or in Los Angeles or in Detroit, if you watch it, each one has a unique name. So you don't know that these channels are connected. But the reality is that they're all connected. They're all owned by the same media company. And so an announcement had to be made. The announcement was made on dozens of TV channels across the continental United States of America, verbatim, word for word, which for the first time alerted so many people that the messaging of these individual, seemingly independent TV channels was all synchronized. It was all coordinated. It's basically one corporate headquarters that's deciding what you watch. It's deciding what news to deliver, how to deliver the news, how to word it, how to craft it. It's an art form, the way news is delivered to the masses. One of the ways, I'll give you one example. One of the ways major international news channels and broadcasters manipulate the audience is not just by how they word the script, how they deliver the news, but also in what order they deliver the news. In other words, they'll be talking about some major conflict, tens of thousands of people getting killed, right? And then right after it, there's a story about some panda in some zoo somewhere in China that's just given birth. You see what that does? You go from tens of thousands of children are being killed to some cute, fluffy panda that just gave birth. It immediately desensitizes you. It immediately takes the effect of learning about carnage and bloodshed and completely subdues it. They have so many techniques they employ in order to make sure, on the one hand, if they covered up the news about the atrocities, nobody would watch them anymore. Nobody would trust them. If they didn't talk about it, people would say you're biased and ultimately you're not a trusted source for my news. They will mention it, but the way they mention it, where they mention it, how they mention it, which guests they invite to comment on it, all of this is carefully crafted. And this is nothing new, by the way. Since the time of Fir'aun, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala quotes him in the Quran as telling the people, "La urikum illa ma ara." You will get your news from me. You will get your commentary from me. You will get your analysis from me. It's whatever I see that gets delivered over to you. And it's the same technique that's being used since that time, 4,000 years, until the year 2023. Now, as a believer, you're supposed to be aware of all of this. In other words, you're supposed to filter the news using an Islamic lens. Awareness, understanding, and therefore removing the shock factor. Now, going back to our discussion in the previous session, Amir al-Mu'mineen said to Al-Harith al-Hamdani that the reason you're confused is because you are surrounded by people and that you have made people, whether it's the quantity of individuals who subscribe to a particular school of thought, because it's effective, as we said. Having 10,000 people tell you one thing and only 2 people who choose to object, it makes you wonder, even if you're certain about that topic, but the more people who approach you, the more uncertain you become. So the Imam says, "Inna deen Allah," when it comes to religion, when it comes to faith, when it comes to matters that transcend this corporal, material world. Yeah, when it comes to medicine, I look for the majority opinion. I look for consensus. When it comes to architecture, when it comes to engineering, when it comes to all these different things, how to operate a camera, how to operate a microphone, I look for experts in the field, and if most experts agree that this is how it's supposed to be done, then sure. But when it comes to religion, the Imam says, إِنَّ دِينَ اللَّهِ لَا يُعْرَفُ بِالرِّجَالِ وَإِنَّمَا بِآيَةِ الْحَقِّ. You need an evidential approach. You need proof before you accept it. In other words, your true north, your barometer has to be evidence. And the evidence has to be backed by our primary sources. And the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sallu alaihi wa the Holy Prophet elucidated on what constitutes evidence in unambiguous terms. He said, إِنِّي تَارِكٌ فِيكُمُ الثَّقَلَيْنِ كِتَابَ اللَّهِ وَعِتْرَتِي أَهْلَ بَيْتِ وَقَدْ نَبَّأَنِي اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ أَنَّهُمَا لَن يَفْتَرِقَا حَتَّى يَرِدَا عَلَيَّ الْحَوْضِ. The Holy Book of Allah and my family, my progeny, my kindred, my successors, the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, that Allah appoints. Even the Holy Prophet himself doesn't appoint them. Just as the Prophet is appointed by Allah, the Imam is also appointed by Allah. The declaration is made by Rasulullah. The announcement is made. The appointment is made by Allah. من كنت مولاه فعلي مولاه اللهم والي من والاه وعاد من عاداه وانصر من نصره واخذل من خذله. So it's the book of Allah and the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt. I was listening to someone the other day and he was saying, SubhanAllah, there's this great scholar somewhere, I won't mention his name. Unfortunately, he's built quite the reputation for himself and some people might recognize the name. He said, this great scholar, he's written an entire book in which he establishes Tawheed and Nubuwwah and Ma'ad and all of these things without using a single verse from the Quran. And I thought to myself, how is that something to be proud of? He said, because he uses self-evident arguments. Allahu Akbar. Self-evident arguments. In other words, the Quran is not self-evident. This book is useless when it comes to engaging in polemical debates. When it comes to establishing the pillars of our faith, this book is useless to them. It's not self-evident. He's got philosophical arguments that are self-evident. So, the words of this so-called sheikh are self-evident, but the words of Allah are not self-evident? Or because it's scriptural. I'm not sure if you've heard the argument. They say, because how can we use the Quran when debating an atheist? The atheist doesn't believe in the Quran, so why would you use the Quran? And I say, first of all, who do you think the Quran was revealed to? To debate with believers? Or with atheists? The words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have an incredible power in themselves because they are the words of the divine. They affect you on a deep, visceral level because it is the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, number one. Number two, they are also self-evident proofs in themselves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala calls the Quran al-Burhan, proof. And you say that, oh, he's written an entire book, subhanallah, without using a single verse, without citing a single hadith. As far as I'm concerned, your book is nothing but garbage if it's not backed by the Quran. I'm not saying that in every argument we cite a verse. Either you cite a verse or you make an argument that's based on the Quran. Otherwise, it's not self-evident. Anyone can debate anything. I can deny that the sun is up right now. How do you prove to me that it is? My point is, Rasulullah said, Kitab Allah wa itrati ahl bayti. And Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he says, Inna deen Allah la yu'rafu bil-rijal wa innama bi-ayat al-haq, it means you have to have evidence that's either based on the Quran or the hadith of the Ahlul Bayt. Atrati Ahlul Bayt. You can't be one of those people who says, oh no, it has to be from the Quran. Well, what do you do with hadith al-Thaqalain? This is basically the argument that was made against Rasulullah. Hasbuna kitabullah. We're content with the book of Allah. That's what they said when the Prophet said, bring me a pen and paper so I could write to you a will after which you will never deviate. That devil said, Hasbuna kitabullah. It has to be both the Quran and the hadith. So, yesterday we said that one of the meanings of La yu'rafu bil-rijal is that you shouldn't be concerned about numbers. How many people subscribe to this argument is completely irrelevant. How many Nobel laureates are atheists? Who gives a damn? How many intellectuals and academics and professors and whatnot are saying that this practice is acceptable when it was unacceptable only 30 years ago? Who cares? Who cares? Ultimately, it's not a numbers game. It's about proof. It's about whether it aligns with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His wishes and His instructions. That's the first meaning. The second meaning, which I touched upon towards the end, was this problem that has become common and predominant even with our own communities. The problem of celebrity worship. The fact that this person is respected. And I'm not even talking about athletes and singers and sports stars and, rock star academics as they call them. I'm not concerned with them. What I am concerned about, what I think is a bigger problem, is when scholars become celebrities. Just because this person has studied this religion and has spent some time and might actually be an expert in this field, just because of that does not make them the ultimate authority on religion. In other words, what we believe in cannot be based on the words and teachings of a scholar, even the grandest of scholars. Right now, our problem is even bigger than that. Forget maraji', forget jurists, forget top experts in Islam. Reciters have become celebrities to the point that people follow their every move. A reciter. In other words, someone who's known for no other skill but their voice. Suddenly that person becomes a point of obsession for our youth. They're completely obsessed with them. They create fan clubs for them on social media. The fan club of such and such reciter. I said this in London this past Muharram, and I'll repeat it here. The day our scholars, let alone performers and reciters and singers, because they are singers, some of them are singers. They're not even reciters. They're performers. They go on a stage, they run around, they jump up and down, they sing using their voice and their vocal cord. The day these people become the source of emulation for us, they become our role models, is a day we should be slapping our heads in shame. As I said, our maraji' shouldn't occupy this position, let alone these performers. You see how far we've drifted? Even the greatest companions of the Ahlul Bayt shouldn't be taken as authorities. Not even Salman. I say Salman because he is the greatest of all of the companions. Absolutely no disrespect. Salamullah ala Salman. But even Salman shouldn't be the authority on my religion, the ultimate authority. In other words, I don't follow Ali ibn Abi Talib because Salman followed him. I should follow Ali ibn Abi Talib because Rasulullah said so. Because the Quran says so. One of the companions of Amir al-Mu'mineen, I forgot his name. He was with him in the battle of Jamal. The battle of Jamal, by the way, and I talked about it at length last year in Fatemiyah in London, is a battle that must be studied thoroughly because it has so many parallels, not only to events soon after, like Siffin and even Karbala, but even in our lives in this day and age. The Battle of Jamal was an incredibly decisive point in history. A lot of people were confused to the point that somebody came to Ammar ibn Yasir. Ammar, sometimes Rasulullah and the Ahlul Bayt would appoint an individual in a specific area and say that this person is an authority. Ammar was put in that position by Rasulullah when he said to him, تَقْتُلُكَ الْفِئَةُ الْبَاغِيَةُ. Ammar, you are a barometer, you're one of the metrics for truth and falsehood, because the ones that will kill you will be the aggressors. If anybody has any confusion in the Battle of Siffin about who's right and who's wrong, look at Ammar. Even though Ammar was just a tiny example of this, the true authority was Amir al-Mu'mineen. But Rasulullah, out of his mercy, wanted to give one additional fail-safe, one more example, so that if people aren't convinced by Amir al-Mu'mineen, if they're that blind, at least they would see where Ammar stands. There's a hadith, in fact, that Sunni scholars narrate, and it's a sahih hadith. It's an authentic tradition in their hadith corpus, where Rasulullah says, إِذَا هَجَمَتْ عَلَيْكُمُ الْفِتَنُ كَقِطَعِ اللَّيْلِ الْمُظْلِمِ عَلَيْكُمْ بِالْقُرْآنِ. First of all, refer back to the Quran. إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمُ اللَّهُ وَرَسُولُهُ وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا الَّذِينَ يُقِيمُونَ الصَّلَاةَ وَيُؤْتُونَ الزَّكَاةَ وَهُمْ رَاكِعُونَ. Refer to the Quran. And the Prophet then says, فَعَلَيْكُمْ بِابْنِ سُمَيَّةَ. Look at the son of Sumayyah, Ammar ibn Yasir. His mother's name was Sumayyah. The Prophet said, look at him. So somebody comes to Ammar ibn Yasir in the Battle of Jamal, or Siffin rather. He says to him, Ya Ammar, how could it possibly be the case that Talha and Zubayr and Aisha are wrong? And when I see that this is a fitna, this isn't a battle between good and evil, this is discord, this is confusion. In other words, that's how they try to murky the waters. They muddy the waters. They say that, oh, it was just a fitna, nobody knows who's right and who's wrong, they were all confused. So he says to him, إِنِّي لَأَرَى الْبَدْرِيَّ لَيَقْتُلُ الْبَدْرِ. I can see the same people that we fought alongside of in the Battle of Badr. Some of them are in this camp, others are in this camp, and they're killing each other. Plus you have the Prophet's wife, you have the Prophet's cousin, you have all of these great companions. He said to him, I don't know what to do. وَإِنَّ عَلِيًّا هُوَ الَّذِي أَرْسَلَنِي إِلَيْكَ. Amir al-Mu'mineen, I went up to him first to seek clarification, but he sent me to you. Why would Amir al-Mu'mineen send this man to Ammar ibn Yasir? Lest Amir al-Mu'mineen say that I am the truth. علي مع الحق والحق مع علي يدور معه حيث ما دار. But if the Imam said that, they would say يجر النار إلى قرصه. Of course he would say that, because it's in his interest to say that I am right and that the other camp is wrong. The Imam doesn't even want to do that. So he sends him to Ammar. He says, go talk to him. Ammar said to him, come with me. He grabbed him by the hand. He went up to the battlefield. He showed him the other camp. He said, you see these flags? I fought against these very same flags 3 times ala ahdi Rasulillah. It was the same people. It was Abu Sufyan and his son Muawiyah and Amr ibn al-As. These same people fought against Rasulullah. 3 times I was there. Every single battle, Abu Sufyan was the leader of the opposing camp, leader of the enemy camp. And now his son is here holding a copy of the Quran, and all of a sudden you've lost your eyesight, you're completely bedazzled and confused and bewildered. What's wrong with you? Open your eyes. You'll see them for who they truly are. Then he said to him, you know, if you killed one of these birds, I don't know whether you have them here, but in some countries you have birds that are considered pests. And if you kill them, it's okay. You know, it's not illegal to kill them. In fact, it's better if you do. He said to him, you know, if you killed a bird like that, would it hurt you? He said, no, not really. It's a pest. He said, if all of this camp were merged into one person, I would kill that person, and it wouldn't bother me as much as it would bother you to kill that bird. In other words, I don't care when I see the evil that this camp represents. So many thousands of people were killed in the Battle of Jamal. Tens of thousands were killed in the Battle of Siffin. These people bring nothing but death and destruction. And above all, they're trying to destroy Islam. They're trying to restore idol worship. And you're telling me that they have some companions and whatnot? Who cares? We're here to defend the truth and nothing else. So, we said that numbers do not matter. Don't be confused. The second meaning is celebrities. My dear brothers and sisters, do not idolize anybody. Anybody. Reciters, performers, speakers, lecturers. Do not idolize them. And that doesn't just mean that you don't follow everything they say and everything they do, but always take what they tell you with a grain of salt. Oh, we're supposed to be doubtful about what they say? Yes. Yes, you are. Why? It's unbelievable the level of confusion that we suffer from. Somebody once came up to me and said that for the last, 5-6 years, I've been reading non-Islamic scriptures. So I've read up on Christianity, I've read up on Judaism, I've read up on Buddhism, I've read up on Jainism, I've read up on, Hinduism. And the idea is that once I'm done with all of that, then I would pick up the Holy Quran and Islamic scriptures and then make my choice based on, make an informed decision, so to speak, right? The idea is that you begin with doubt until you reach certainty. I said, who told you that? Who told you that you're supposed to begin with doubt and then work your way up to certainty? Based on which verse in the Quran? Based on which hadith of the Prophet or the Ahlul Bayt? He said, that's Kantian philosophy, first of all. I said, who cares? He said, secondly, the verse in the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَبَشَّرْ عِبَادٍ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلِ. Give glad tidings to the servants who listen to the speech, وَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. Then they will follow the best of what they've heard. So I started slapping my forehead when I heard that. I said, see, this is our problem. When somebody says something on the pulpit, they're never challenged. Nobody ever thinks hard enough to say, hang on a second, that statement which you just made, which verse is it based on? Which hadith is it based on? Don't we say, الْحَقُّ مَا رَضِيتُمُوهُ وَالْبَاطِلُ مَا أَسْخَطْتُمُوهُ وَالْمَعْرُوفُ مَا أَمَرْتُمْ بِهِ وَالْمُنْكَرُ مَا نَهَيْتُمْ عَنْهُ. Right is that which the Imam, the Hujjah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet commands me to do. Wrong is what the Hujjah of Allah forbids me from. The Hujjah of Allah is the barometer of truth and falsehood. A scholar, a speaker, a reciter, a performer, when they say something, ask them, where's your evidence? Where's your proof? Just because you have a turban on your head, just because you sit on the pulpit, does not make you an authority. There are conditions that you have to satisfy. The first, that person has to be an actual scholar, not a performer, not someone who has an academic degree but zero education in an Islamic seminary, like half the speakers we have in the English world now. Number one, they have to be scholars, experts in the field of religion. Number two, when they speak, they have to provide evidence. Because lectures are confined to a specific time frame, they may not be able to present all of their evidence. Pull them into a corner after the lecture and say, give me your evidence, give me your proof. Secondly, or thirdly, when they give you the evidence, let's say they share this verse with you. Tell them, who says this is the meaning of this verse? Could you elaborate on that? Where is the tafsir basis for your interpretation of this verse in the Quran? وَبَشَّرْ عِبَادِ الَّذِينَ يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلِ. First of all, Allah says, ibad. He doesn't say anyone in society should go out and learn everything there is to learn and then make up their mind about it. He says, ibad. They are worshippers, they're slaves of Allah, they are believers to begin with. In other words, this is an address to people who already believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Not someone who wants to start with doubt. Number one. Number two, يَسْتَمِعُونَ الْقَوْلِ. Al-qawl, alif lam al-ta'rif. Which qawl is this? Which speech is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking about? Someone went to the Imam. He said to him, what's this verse talking about? He said, al-qawl is a reference to the Quran. In other words, those give glad tidings to those who listen to the verses of the Quran, not the scriptures of Hinduism and Buddhism. You start with the Quran, you start with certainty. فَيَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. And follow the best of that speech. Does that mean that the Quran contains verses that are better and verses that are worse? Of course not. It doesn't make any sense. يَتَّبِعُونَ أَحْسَنَهُ. The Imam said to him, this dhamir refers to al-ittiba'. In other words, they follow the Quran in the best manner. It's not saying they follow the best of the things that you've stumbled upon. You follow the best scripture that you happen to find on the seat next to you on the train. Read the Quran, understand the Quran, follow the Quran in the best possible way. That's what the verse is saying. According to the proof, according to the Imam, the interpreter of the Quran, the ultimate authority on the Quran. So you see how diametrically opposed these two interpretations are? So when someone says something that makes you wonder whether they're right or wrong, tell them, where is the evidence, number one. Number two, show me that the interpretation you've extrapolated from this verse or this hadith is the correct one. Celebrity culture is a cancer. As I said, even when it comes to the grandest of scholars. Is it possible that the grandest of scholars might deviate? Yes. Who was Zubayr? Zubayr was not just the Prophet's cousin. Ibn al-Awwam ibn Safiyyah. Safiyyah was the Prophet's aunt. Someone who was close to the Prophet. Zubayr was her son. But not only was he related to the Prophet, Zubayr was among the small team of people appointed by Fatemiyah al-Zahra and given permission to participate in her funeral. It was a very select group of people that Fatemiyah Zahra handpicked. The funeral was a secret one. Zubayr was one of them. According to some, Fatemiyah Zahra even said to Amir al-Mu'mineen that if you cannot carry out my instructions after my death, I will appoint Zubayr as the executor of my will. That was Zubayr. Zubayr was a defender of Rasulullah. When he was eventually killed, they brought his sword to Amir al-Mu'mineen. The Imam said, سَيْفٌ لَطَالَمَا كَشَفَ الْكَرْبَ عَنْ وَجْهِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. This sword has defended Rasulullah on so many occasions. That Zubayr, yes. Could he falter? Could he deviate? He did. He did. Have you heard the name of Ash-Shalmaghani? Ash-Shalmaghani was the grandest scholar during the reign of the third emissary of Imam al-Zaman. In other words, during the lesser occultation. May Allah hasten his reappearance. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. He had a book. This book was the equivalent of today's Risala Amaliyah. In other words, the Shia community during the lesser occultation would refer to his books on instructions about their acts of worship, about what is halal and haram. Grand scholar, respected by everyone. It was during the time of Hussein ibn Ruh. And yet, one mistake here, one mistake there. Eventually, a little jealousy here, a little envy there. Imam al-Zaman cursed him. He issued a statement من الناحية المقدسة and he did la'na on him. Is it possible that the grandest of scholars might deviate? Yes, we have so many examples of that. So many examples. The hadith says, beware of even following a scholar and treating him as though he is just one level below the infallible. Our greatest of scholars are nothing but specks of dust under the feet of the Imams. That's what they say about themselves. They acknowledge this. But to think that after the Imam, we have this scholar. The Imam says, don't ever do that. إياك أن تنصب أحدا دون الحجة فتصدقه في كل ما يقول. Don't take his word as the gospel truth, so to speak. Don't take his word as some kind of divine revelation. It's not. His word is the informed opinion of a scholar who has spent many long years studying the words and traditions and actions of the holy, infallible Imams and giving you their interpretation of them. That's it. And yes, it's the best we've got. Right now, given our lack of access to the Imam of our time, it is like aklul meat. Shaykh al-Ansari says at the beginning of his book, he says, look, just like when you're in the desert and you have lost your way, you're stranded, and you're about to die of starvation, you see a dead carcass of an animal, it's haram to eat it, but because you have no other choice, you get to eat it. Islam allows you to eat this cadaver so as to protect your life, to preserve your life. Just like that, in the time of the occultation of our master and our guardian and our Imam, because we have nothing else to go with, you can follow the opinions that I've written in this book. Just like eating a dead carcass. It's the best we have. And it's our only choice. And we have to follow the leadership of these scholars, the scholars who have two conditions, by the way, and this applies to speakers, it applies to everyone who delivers your religion to you. Number one, they have to have knowledge. A stint at some university does not qualify. They have to have spent many years studying in the Hawza. Number two, they have to be pious. In other words, their actions, their lives, they have to be compatible with what they teach. And they shouldn't be enamored by the pleasures of this world. اتبعوا من لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون, as we read in Surah Yasin. These two conditions are stipulated. You want to follow someone? Follow the ones who resemble the prophets and the imams as best as they can. And two conditions are stipulated. Number one, they don't ask you for compensation. They're not looking to get your money. They're not looking to be self-serving, right? Of course they have to make a living. Of course they have to live a dignified life. But their ultimate goal isn't to enrich themselves. لا يسألكم أجرا وهم مهتدون. And they themselves are guided. The way they lead their own lives is compatible with the Quran and the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. Then and only then can you listen to them. And you follow them as much as they provide you with evidence, as much as they give you proof. Otherwise, if I happen to be a fan, quote unquote, of a scholar, if that scholar falls down, I'll fall down with him. How many times have you heard that there is a mass exodus from the Catholic Church because of the sexual abuse scandals that are reported on every once in a while? How many people are leaving Christianity because of the actions of priests? Same thing is happening within Islam. Same thing happens to us as Shia of the Ahlul Bayt. A scholar falls and he takes down so many people with him. Why? Because we've anchored our faith to that scholar instead of to the proof of Allah, the Holy Prophet and the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim as-salam. So, celebrity culture, idol worship, as in celebrities, right? Worship is to listen to what they say, follow them, be obsessed by them. Don't ever fall into that, especially our youth. And sometimes our youth do it with good intentions. And it's like this argument that I'd rather have them obsessed by such and such speaker or reciter than by some singer or actress. And I kind of get the argument, but it's an emotional one. It's an emotional one. Because the same person, whether they happen to be Shia or not, right, can bring them down if they fall themselves. Why do you think that people lost their way during the time of confusion after the death of Rasulullah? To the point that they would tell Fatemiyah to Zahra, we apologize. We already gave our pledge of allegiance to such and such. Fatemiyah to Zahra would say, I don't want your apology. That's like doing something evil and then apologizing for it. That's like saying, I worship the idols, but I apologize too late. I'm a loyal person. I've already given my pledge to somebody else. You all know that Ali ibn Abi Talib was the rightful successor to Rasulullah. You were witness on the day of Ghadir to all of the things that Rasulullah said. A lengthy sermon in which Rasulullah talked about divine appointment and talked about Amirul Mu'mineen and his virtues and talked about even all the way down to Imam al-Zaman. He talked about all these things. You were witness to that. And now you're apologizing. The reason that happened is because people anchored their faith to individuals as opposed to the proof of Allah. The Fatemiyah sermon is mostly about the virtues of Amirul Mu'mineen. And not Amirul Mu'mineen in kind of a, X versus Z. Rather, it was about saying that Ali ibn Abi Talib is the most qualified person for this position. Ali ibn Abi Talib is the first believer. Ali ibn Abi Talib was the first to step up in the battle of Ahzab. Ali ibn Abi Talib was always the first to defend Rasulullah. Ali ibn Abi Talib was someone who was unparalleled. No one could compete with him. Suddenly you have this, that, or the other taking positions of authority. Ali ibn Abi Talib wasn't even given the position of a police officer. He had to be confined to his home for for 25 years. And eventually, Fatimah al-Zahra gets buried at night. At night. Amir al-Mu'mineen says as much to Rasulullah. He says, Ya Rasulullah, your daughter was buried at night. Fatima was the empress of this empire. She was the princess of Hijaz. And that's the worldly titles. Fatima was Sayyidatu Nisa'il Jannah. Fatima was Bad'atu Rasulillah. When the Prophet said, Fatimatu Bad'atun minni, it means that when you oppressed her, you oppressed Rasulullah. When you crushed her, you crushed Rasulullah. Rather, you crushed Allah. You crushed all divine values between the wall and the door. Man آذاها فقد آذاني ومن آذاني فقد آذى الله, Rasulullah said. And yet it comes down to the point where Fatimah al-Zahra calls Amir al-Mu'mineen to her bedside. She says to him, Ya Aba al-Hasan, inni ma asaytuka marratan. I've never obeyed you, have I? Amir al-Mu'mineen said, Hasha laki ya bint Rasulillah. Exalted are you from being disobedient to me. Even though Fatimah al-Zahra is at the same level and same rank as Ali ibn Abi Talib, but as a wife, she never disobeyed him, setting an example for all the women throughout history who take Fatima as their mistress, as their leader. Ma asaytuka qat. Have I ever disobeyed you? Amir al-Mu'mineen said, of course not. Then she said to him, if that's the case, I have a set of wishes. Would you be able to carry them out for me? Amir al-Mu'mineen said, Hubban wa karama. Of course. Not only did Fatima never disobey Amir al-Mu'mineen, she never even asked him for anything. And so imagine a wife who's never asked her husband for any favors, for anything throughout their lives. Now for the first time, she has a set of requests. What are those requests? I want a bigger home. I want a car. I want this. I want luxuries. No. She says to him, Ya Aba al-Hasan, إِذَا هَدَأَتِ النُّفُوسِ. When everybody goes to bed, when all the eyes are shut, فَغَسِّلْنِي لَيْلًا وَكَفِّنِّي لَيْلًا وَادْفُنِّي لَيْلًا لَا نَهَارًا سِرًّا لَا جَهَارًا. I wish for you to prepare me at night. I want you to enshroud me at night. I would like for you to bury me at night and in secret, not in public. And do not let any of those who oppressed me, who killed me, who injured me, do not let any of them take part in my funeral. And so Amir al-Mu'mineen wants to carry out the last wishes of his beloved wife, Fatimah. When it was night time, the Imam told everyone, Al-Hasan, Hussein, Zainab, Kulthum, Fidda, Al-Miqdad, Ammar, Salman, all these small group of companions, the Imam said to them, don't cry out loud, lest anyone find out that Fatima has died. He calmed everyone down constantly. Then he went to bathe the body of his wife Fatima. As he was washing the body, something happened. We don't know at the time. They didn't know what had happened. The Imam was washing the body over her clothes. Then suddenly the Imam went to the corner of the room. He placed his forehead on the wall and he burst into tears. When the Imam finished the preparing, then Asma asked him, she was the one handing the water to Amir al-Mu'mineen. She said to him, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, you told us to cry softly and yet suddenly you burst into tears. What happened? He said to her, Ya Asma, la تلوميني. Don't blame me. I was washing the body of Fatima. When I reached her chest, I noticed a recess and I realized that her ribs were broken. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون.